Hardball, more and more soldiers returning from Iraq and Afghanistan are expressing their views about what is going on there and what needs to be done. Now, 7 current active duty soldiers published a New York Times op-ed piece written in Baghdad saying the following, quote, "To believe that Americans can win over a recalcitrant local population and win this counterinsurgency is far-fetched. The claim that we are increasingly in control of the battlefields in Iraq is an assessment arrived at through a flawed, American-centered framework. Yes, we are militarily superior, but our successes are offset by failures elsewhere," unquote. Are the soldiers speaking truth to power or sending a message that is out of line? That's our hardball debate tonight. John Soltz is an Iraq War veteran and the chair of VoteVets.org. And Pete Hegseth is also an Iraq War veteran and executive director of Vets for Freedom. Gentlemen, John, let's start with you. The piece, powerful piece, very well written. Your thoughts on it?
I think it's very powerful, and I think it sends a very strong point that the surge hasn't worked, that these guys on the ground are looking for political solutions. They bring up some tremendous points about the conundrum that America faces in this war. We're, cut a deal sort of with the Sunnis to fight the Wahhabi terrorists that have entered the country. We've armed them because we've helped an Iraqi army and a Shia majority in the country gain control of it. And that what they're really looking for, I think, in this is a regional diplomatic and political strategy that picks a side. I mean, what we've done here with the president is punted the football to hand this war to the Democrats, because really what he's trying to do with the surge is create a domestic political space for him to show success, to salvage himself. And in reality, our guys are dying for an Iraqi government that's on vacation. So I think what these soldiers want to see us do is pick a side. Are we going to support a Shia Arab state, or are we going to side with the Sunnis, or are we going to have a regional political strategy that incorporates our neighbors and allows us to protect the Sunni minority while establish a Shia majority? We haven't done the political work, and I think that's what they're saying.
Peter, there are so many powerful points raised in this piece in yesterday's Times, the war as we saw it. First of all, what do you figure is happening up the chain of command with regard to the guys whose names are on the piece?
Well, it certainly depends on what kind of heads up they gave their chain of command, and that's a decision the chain of command will have to make. Because usually you're not hearing from active duty soldiers in a war zone. But it's also important to remember these are 7 soldiers in one unit in a particular neighborhood in Baghdad. I respect their opinion. I think it was a well-written piece. But the 82nd Airborne is responsible for a 10 by 10 kilometer section of Baghdad that has not yet been affected by the surge environment. So they've been in an area where dealing with and using policies and using a strategy that has not worked thus far, but they have yet to see the surge impact their neighborhood, and I think they will see the kind of changes that we've seen elsewhere in the country so far. If you look at Anbar province and you look at political reconciliation, it happens when we provide military security. You have to provide, the peace itself said the Iraqis don't want food, they want security first.
Right.
And that's what General Petraeus is trying to do, and that's what he's done in Anbar province, he's doing in Diyala and Baghdad. And if you ask those people out in Anbar province who the occupying force is, they will tell you straight out it is Al-Qaeda. They've seen the face of what that worldview looks like, what it looks like when those people impose their worldview on the population. They've rejected it, and American soldiers and the security they provided helped them shed that occupation. And now they're living with peace on the streets, and there was true political reconciliation with the tribes, and there are opportunities to do that elsewhere, including in Sadr City, where the 82nd Airborne is. I understand their frustration, I respect their opinions, but I think it's too early to decide whether or not it's failed in that particular neighborhood.
Okay, but John, again, off of what Peter said, and off of the piece itself, there is no doubt that there has been progress in Anbar province, Fallujah, Ramadi, other cities in Anbar province, and yet the idea of security, the Iraqis seeking security of certain form of it is present in certain neighborhoods in Baghdad right now, a sprawling city. We certainly don't have enough soldiers to provide security for the entire city, but the theme of the piece, one of the central themes of this piece, is that the security is there as long as we are there, and we're not going to be there forever. So what does that do to the mission?
Well, I want to address the Anbar situation because I think that's the most important. We haven't surged in Anbar. What we've done is we have the Shia Arab state that's evolved with support from Iran inside of Iraq.
They want to
excuse me for a second. They want to consolidate their power. So what we've done is we've aligned ourselves militarily. We've given arms to the Sunni insurgents to turn against Al-Qaeda. We cut a political deal in Anbar. We did not surge our troops there. We surged in Baghdad. There's 6 million people that live in Baghdad. We need 160,000 combat troops just for that area. I think these troops feel frustration. I think many of them are probably on their second tours. When I was in Baghdad in 2003, we controlled a lot of the terrain that we're fighting fighting for today. So from a tactical standpoint, our troops kill what they shoot at. Our troops are professional military soldiers. They're the best in the world. They're trained to fight. They're trained to kill. They're trained to hold terrain. But how does that quantify political leverage to get a negotiating process, but to protect the Sunni minority and support a Shia majority? Because that's really what this is about. Who is America supporting in this civil war? And as the soldier said, if we don't support anybody, then everybody's going to be against us. Because as the soldier said, they claim we're an occupying force.
Let me read this to both of you, and then Pete, jump in here. You first after I read this. This is a paragraph from the piece yesterday in the Times, The War as We Saw It. A few nights ago, for example, we witnessed the death of one American soldier and the critical wounding of 2 others when a lethal armor-piercing explosive was detonated between an Iraqi army checkpoint and a police one. Local Iraqis readily testified to American investigators that Iraqi police and army officers escorted the triggermen and helped plant the bomb. These civilians highlighted their own predicament. Had they informed the Americans of the bomb before the incident, the Iraqi army, the police, or the local Shiite militia would have killed their families. That's not exactly a winnable situation. Peter.
Mike, there's no doubt there are Iraqi army soldiers and Iraqi policemen who are not within the law there, but that is not necessarily indicative of the security situation. It's also indicative of an environment where Americans have not provided security. I want to get back to what John talked about in Anbar province. If you look at what happened in Ramadi and the reasons the tribes rose up, it is because we cleared that city and committed to it with over 40 patrol bases on the ground providing neighborhood security, and that allowed the tribal sheikhs and to rise up and say, we're going to push out Al-Qaeda. It is our security that did that, and we are still holding Ramadi. And what's happening is Iraqi security forces, indigenous forces, are signing up for the police and the army in record numbers to provide security in their own neighborhoods. Are they all going to be good? No, they're going to be bad apples in every single army. But should we, because we've got a few bad apples, should we step back and allow the entire country to implode and leave a haven for Al-Qaeda? We've seen progress happening in Anbar, and it's because Americans committed to security. We need those same kind of commitments throughout Baghdad and in Diyala. It's what's happening right now, and that neighborhood that these 82nd Airborne soldiers are talking about, while unsafe, has the possibility to be secured. A Marine colonel said that Anbar province was lost 7 months ago. Tell that to the guys that are there now. Tell that the Iraqis that are there now that have security in their streets.
The fact of the matter is that success in Anbar is present because we cut a political deal with the Sunnis. They understand that there's the Badr Corps, the Mahdi army.
Is.
So you have these Shia militias and Iranian influence that's consolidating power for the first Shia Arab state. The Sunnis understand that their only benefit, their only hope, is now to cut a deal with the Americans where we arm the Sunnis to fight, this mystery Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
Sunnis have
because essentially what we're doing right now is we're fueling both sides of a civil war. And so we need a regional policy that protects the minority and helps the majority. We have not done the political and diplomatic work required to support our troops on the ground.
We have to end it there. John, Peter, thank you very much, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Up next, our hardball roundtable on all of today's